There's probably nothing more frustrating in life than watching bad people thrive after doing bad things. This has been known for a long time. In fact, there's a famous line in Ecclesiastes 8 or something like that, how frustrating it is to watch the wicked get what the righteous deserve and the righteous get what the wicked deserve. And all around us, you see that. And now more than ever, it feels like, look at Bill Gates. Bill Gates knows that he'll never face justice in this life. Bill Gates is one of the richest people in the world. And no matter how many times he is exposed for what he is, which is really an enemy of our civilization, he faces no penalty at all. There's no one in power in the United States who wouldn't be happy to receive Bill Gates as a visiting dignitary in his office or have him over for dinner and then brag to your friends about, I had dinner with Bill Gates. It's good to be Bill Gates, and it shouldn't be. And that's true for so many. Larry Silverstein, who owned Building 7 on 9/11, 95 years old and a billionaire. So you ask yourself, looking around, like, where's the justice? It seems inverted. And there's really no episode in American life, at least in our lives in the last 60 years, where that's more obvious than during COVID. Who were the victims of COVID? Well, they're the people who you think of as the best people in our society, the small business owners, just kind of doing their thing, running their store, their little family business. They got crushed and eliminated in favor of Amazon and Netflix and Airbnb. Companies that don't have your best interest at heart, aren't ethical in any recognizable sense, and yet they got bigger, richer, and the decent people got destroyed. And that's true in the human level too. Who suffered? Well, I don't know, nurses and firemen and cops and enlisted Navy SEALs who didn't want the vax. They all got fired. They lost their jobs. Their lives were destroyed. They lost their pensions because they wouldn't take the vax. And who thrived? Well, the guy at the top of the ugly pyramid of COVID, Tony Fauci. Tony Fauci was responsible for America's response, in some ways the West's response to COVID, a true disaster by any measure. Of course, they lie about everything around COVID, but people did die. They claim up to 35 million people died during COVID, 35 million. Whether that number is real or not, and we'll, of course, never know. They classified car accidents as COVID deaths. So, I mean, again, the lying was so embedded in the reporting of the numbers that no one will ever even guess at what the real toll was. But tons of people died, for sure. The U.S. economy was turned upside down. The country itself has basically a different system of government than it had before COVID. No one voted on that. It just kind of happened because of COVID. And the long-term effects are still unknown, but they're not good. The COVID vaccine didn't prevent people from getting COVID. It poisoned them. It lowered the fertility rate. It clearly hiked the cancer rate. It's unbelievable that people injected that into their bodies. The evidence is coming in, and there's really no question about it. The COVID vax was very, very bad. It wasn't a vaccine. It was some kind of weird gene therapy. And it was tested on the entire population of the West. And the guy at the very top of that command structure, again, Tony Fauci, who's 85 now, was he punished? No. He famously got a blanket pardon. He wasn't even charged with anything, but Joe Biden, as one of his last acts as president, gave him a pardon for crimes he might be charged with. That tells you a lot. And he went back to Washington, where he spent his entire adult life as one of the highest paid federal employees, to enjoy his sort of retirement. He got some kind of sinecure at Georgetown. He's just a CIA cutout posing as a university. And he got lifetime Secret Service protection, free federal bodyguards that you pay for. Do you have those? No. And he can be seen every day walking through Glover Archibald Park in Northwest DC, one of the prettiest urban centers in the world, with his bodyguards that you pay for. So how is that justice? He clearly knew that this wasn't a natural virus. It clearly knew, now we know he knew, that it came from the Wuhan lab. He lied about that. He lied about the efficacy of the COVID shots. He lied about so much. So when does he get punished for what he did? Since so many people who did nothing wrong have been punished, why are the wicked being treated like the righteous? It's fair to ask that. It's fair to ask even deeper questions about the nature of justice in the universe. Why would a loving God allow this? That's a fair question. And then you see Tony Fauci. Not the idea of Tony Fauci or the cartoon villain of Tony Fauci, but actually Tony Fauci as of, well, today. And you realize he's not getting away with anything. None of them are. Justice is real. Wrongdoers are always punished, period. That's a fact of life, whether it's obvious at the time or not. And that punishment begins immediately. And you can see it when you look at them. You can see it when you look at Bill Gates. Is Bill Gates winning? He's apparently beaten his venereal disease, we learned about in the Epstein files, but is he winning? Is that a happy man? With a wife who loves him and kids who respect him? With deep personal friendships? No. And today we learn, without question, that Tony Fauci is in that same category. He's still alive, but in some very obvious sense, he's already in hell. And we know that because he testified before the Senate Homeland Security Committee today at the demand of the chairman of that committee, Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. And he called Fauci to testify, to respond to Fauci's own personal diary. Now, how exactly would a Senate committee, how would Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky have Tony Fauci's personal diary? Well, because it was on government servers. So as you assess everything you're about to learn about Tony Fauci's thoughts during COVID, and now we know what they are because, again, we have his personal diary, keep in mind that nobody broke into his house in Washington and stole it. This is a man who worked for the federal government at taxpayer expense as a public servant since 1968, since the day he left his residency, since he became a doctor. He never practiced medicine. He was never a scientist. He was a health administrator. He was a bureaucrat. That's one of the reasons he was such an obvious hero for the lifestyle liberals who comprise the American media. Because above all, they worship what? Bureaucracy. The committee, credentials. Decisions made by the group. These are weak and fearful people. They distrust strength and crisp, clear language and crisp, clear decision-making. They are only comfortable in a world governed by bureaucracy. The HR department writ large, otherwise known as the federal government, millions and millions of federal workers who collectively control almost every aspect of your life, and more now since COVID. So they worshiped Tony Fauci. And they still do, of course. He was a natural hero for them. A fearful, obviously mediocre beta male who couched totalitarian behavior in the language of therapy. We're doing this because it's safe. We're going to put a camera in your car, violating your last private sanctuary on this planet because if you were to nod off because you were sleepy, that might pose a danger to you and those around you. That's the language of bureaucratic totalitarianism. And that's very much the language that Anthony Fauci has spent the last 65 years speaking in public and in private. So naturally, they love him because he really is the perfect distillation of who they are and the system that, above all, they support. It's not a meritocracy, it's just the opposite. It's a system that elevates the mediocre to positions of power and hides their mediocrity in the crowd. That's what a bureaucracy is. There is no individual in a bureaucracy because a bureaucracy speaks as one. We've decided, we believe, we think. So, in a sense, it's kind of a system that produces anti-heroes, certainly non-heroes. But anyway, at the top of it is Anthony Fauci. And so comfortable with the system was Anthony Fauci that he literally wrote his personal diary on a government computer, and it was saved to a government server because Tony Fauci saw no meaningful distinction between the government and himself. Like so many people who serve us, he believes he owns us because he doesn't see any distinction between the US government and its aims and his own. Fascinating. In any case, Tony Fauci shows up today at the Senate under subpoena to respond to questions from the committee. And in so doing, he reveals who he really is. Now watch this. This is his opening statement. He's reading it, and it tells you so much about him. But notice for a moment what he's doing is he's speaking. He's shaking. He's shaking. He's terrified. And for a moment, as you watch it, and watch it again later, you find yourself feeling for the man. It's like the Wizard of Oz, revealed with the curtain pulled back. This is not some all-powerful dictator. This is a sad and terrified old man who's not very smart, who's captured by his own narcissism. All he can think or talk about is himself. And of course, like all narcissists, fundamentally, he's afraid. So here's Tony Fauci shaking as he reads his opening statement.
Given Senator Paul's obvious obsession with calling for my prosecution, his repeated slanderous comments about me, and recently his publicly releasing my unredacted personal diary aimed at embarrassing and intimidating me, the only conclusion I can reach is that the sole reason he is calling me before this committee is to get me to say something, anything, that could vindicate his repeated public pledges that I end up, in his words, quote, behind bars, unquote. Any reasonable person who has followed his unhinged obsession with me would readily come to the same conclusion. Therefore, although it pains me to do so, because of the respect I have for the legislative branch of government and my decades-long record of cooperating with Congress, under the advice of my attorneys, I will invoke my right under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution to refrain from answering your questions. Thank you.
That's Anthony Fauci? That's the guy we're mad at and spent so many years afraid of and frustrated by, and he needs to go to jail. Anthony Fauci, he's a threat. No, he's pathetic. He's not very smart. He talks only about himself. Senator Paul's unhinged obsession with me. He doesn't like me. Well, as you're about to discover when we go through portions of his diary, the only person with an unhinged obsession with Anthony Fauci is, in fact, Anthony Fauci. That's his main concern. There's no attempt to address the substance of COVID. Again, by Fauci's own estimate, this disease, this pandemic, killed tens of millions of people around the world, tens of millions, and changed government's relationship to its populations in every Western country, in most countries around the world, and caused the largest vaccination program of what was not a vaccine in history. And by the way, in so doing, eliminated core constitutional rights, which is why it takes a man with no self-awareness whatsoever to invoke the Constitution, my constitutional right under the Fifth Amendment not to incriminate myself. Really, what about your constitutional right to say what you think is true? That would be the First Amendment, not the Fifth, the First. And of course, we lost that during COVID. Government directed social media companies to eliminate, to just disappear dissenting views on COVID. Anybody who had an opinion different from Anthony Fauci was silenced. And I can speak to that firsthand, in fact. That is not a violation of your constitutional rights. That's a violation of your most basic constitutional right, which is the right as a citizen to say what you think. And Fauci did his part to eliminate that right, but now he's invoking another right in the Constitution because it's a sacred document. I mean, what are we looking at here? It's not just hypocrisy. It's a total lack of awareness of anybody but yourself. What we're really looking at here is deep mediocrity. And as you watch this, if you watched any of the hearings today, you came away with the same feeling you had if you spent any time reading Jeffrey Epstein's personal correspondence. We spent years talking about Jeffrey Epstein, this dark genius, this puppet master behind a shadowy cabal running the world. And then you read his texts and emails, and you're like, actually, he's kind of like a middling IQ guy from Brooklyn, which is, by the way, exactly who Tony Fauci is, son of a pharmacist from Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn. That's not an attack on Brooklyn. It's merely the observation that these are not impressive people. They're not in charge of anything. They are functionaries. They are carrying out tasks assigned to them by others, obviously. What you're looking at, not to put too fine a point on it, is the banality of evil. The people who carry out the crimes, probably not the masterminds behind the crimes. And certainly Tony Fauci, obviously Tony Fauci, like Jeffrey Epstein, is not capable of being the mastermind behind anything. Probably not the mastermind behind a dinner party. He's a doctor who never practiced medicine, a scientist who never did science. He's a lifelong health administrator. And he's about as clever as you would imagine, which is not very. And if you need more evidence of that, and more evidence that this country is like reaching the level of parity, here was Dr. Tony Fauci's responses to Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri's simple questions about, I don't know, what is the color of your necktie? Watch this.
What day of the week is it today?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
What color tie are you wearing?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
What color's the carpet in front of you?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Imagine participating in a display like that. Imagine humiliating yourself like that. Imagine believing there's some risk to describing the day of the week or the color of your necktie. Imagine taking advice from lawyers. The whole thing is amazing. And it's amazing because it shows that Tony Fauci is not only not a great man, not a figure out of history, managed COVID. He's a tiny man, and not just physically. He's a tiny man. His lawyer tells him to read back a canned line like Jimmy Hoffa about the Fifth Amendment in response to any question, and he does it. Imagine that. Imagine your lawyer says, no, every question gets this response. On advice of my counsel, I refuse to answer that on the grounds it might incriminate me under the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution. You say, I'm not gonna do that. If they ask a question that I think exposes me, maybe I will. But if they ask you what day of the week is, I'm gonna say it's Wednesday, because it is. Because I'm not a robot or a trained SEAL. I'm not an animal, I'm a man. And that's humiliating. Imagine nodding as your lawyer says, okay, Mr. Attorney. Again, imagine taking important advice from a lawyer. Or having dinner with one, for that matter. kind of a window into what went wrong in the whole American experiment. Let's put the lawyers in charge. The most fearful, dumbest, smallest thinkers we can find. They're literally lawyers. We'll put them in charge. What color is your necktie? I can't answer the question on the grounds that oh, shut up. A society like that is going nowhere but down. Lawyers. Okay, now. And they're just like Fauci and Epstein. It's the banality of evil. It's evil by committee. It's not even Mussolini evil. It's Brezhnev evil. And it's embarrassing. So, to Fauci's real concerns. It's not COVID. He didn't talk about COVID today and how he saved lives or how the vax actually worked, despite the fact he kept getting corona after getting vaccinated multiple times and boosted like 6 times, and he kept getting COVID. Do you remember that? It was unbelievable. It was like, this can't be happening. But it did happen, and he's not punished formally, but as you could just see, he's not thriving. He's not winning. He's being punished right now. And there's more to come for him and for a lot of us, honestly. It's not just Fauci. Any case, this is what he cared about. So I want to read apparently verbatim passage from his personal diary, the one he left on his personal servers, which also belonged to you and me and everyone else in this country because they were government servers. And this is from May 21st, 2020. So this was really in the opening days. So most of us hear that something's going on in central China in January of 2020. And by May 21st of 2020, which is, by the way, right before the George Floyd hoax happened, right before that guy OD'd in Minneapolis, and we pretend he was beaten to death by a white cop because all whites are racist. I don't know if you remember that. That guy's still in jail, by the way. Trump administration hasn't done anything about that, but okay. Here's what Fauci was thinking about. This apparently is real, and this tells you everything. And by the way, we could go through and like all the cases, and we're going to speak to an actual doctor, Mary Bowden, in just a minute, about what Fauci knew about the virus. But really, most of his diary that we've seen is not about the virus and the spike proteins and where did it come from. And no, it's about him and how many shows he did and who in the media is nice and who's mean, who's putting him on TV, how many cable hits he's doing. I mean, this is the smallest bore stuff imaginable, because narcissism ultimately is the most uninteresting possible mental disorder, because it's all about you. And honestly, you're not that interesting. None of us are that interesting. Apparently his mom never told him that. She should have. In any case, here's May 21st, 2020, and I'm quoting. Big front page article about me appeared in the Washington Post. Very flattering. The situation with my national and international fame is explosive and really unimaginable. It is not hyperbole to say that today I am the most famous and talked about person in the country and one of the most recognizable peacein in the world. Just to restate, the guy's an idiot. He's one of the most recognizable peacein in the world, people in the world. Countless profiles on me in multiple media. I cannot even read all the things that are written about me since I am so busy. Seriously. Like, what? Are you kidding? You're like a 15-year-old girl? This is insane. Quote, POTUS, that'd be the President of the United States, seems to be enamored of me, even though I am taking the spotlight away from him. We're developing a very unique and interesting relationship. Okay, just editor's note here. Something cannot be very unique, moron. Unique means singular. Something is either unique or it's not. Unique means there's nothing like it. It stands alone. It is unique. So you can't actually qualify unique. You don't say very, how can something be very unique? Are you joking? This is the science? Excuse me. We're developing a very unique and interesting relationship. The entire Secret Service Corps is coming over to me and chatting. They let me into the first gate at the White House without even checking ID. Everyone is worried about my health and welfare, probably because it's all over the place that I'm almost 80 years old. Are you kidding? This is America's top scientist. It's actually so perfect. This is America's top scientist responding to the most grave public health threat in history of the world. And he's bragging about how he's famous? I'm the most recognizable man in the world. The Secret Service loves me to let me in without even checking ID. I'm that famous. Holy smokes. How reassuring it would be if his diary was like, we're taking over the world. We're poisoning people with gene therapy. They think it's a vaccine. I talked to my masters in Tel Aviv this morning. We're almost there. We almost have them. You'd be like, okay, at least I know what's going on. But this evil mastermind is talking about his cable news hits and how famous he is? I mean, barf. It's like, you hate to say it, but it's like, it really is kind of a modern American version of megalomania. He's not taking over the world. He's dominating MSNBC and Fox News for that matter. He goes on about how in his diary, we're not going to put it up, but his favorite person in the whole administration is Alyssa Farah. Alyssa Farah, who's like, not a genius, but he loves her because it's probably about the same, like intellectually, but he loves her because she's encouraging him to do more TV hits. I want you on TV all day. And when she finally resigns from the White House because she's a liberal, I mean, obviously, of course she is, he's like, oh, she's the only good person because she got me on all these television shows. His overriding concern, if you read the diary, is making sure that he continues to do cable news hits. Not to spread information or to calm the temperature or anything like that, not to make anything better. And certainly, there's no public health objective here. It's just so he can be famous. He's 80 years old. Man, in some ways, it's like the saddest thing you will ever read. Because we can confirm that going on cable news No matter how often you do it, you could spend 30 years going on cable news. You could have your own show on cable news. And you know what it means? You know what it adds up to? And we can confirm this. Nothing. Nothing. It means literally nothing. You're staring into a camera and yapping. Does that get you into heaven? Does that make your children love you more? Is your wife impressed? No. Like, nobody cares. It's absurd. Anyway, that's the diary. So you can imagine there are tons, really, the salient points in the whole diary are his kibitzing behind the scenes with cable news people who he's so impressed by. But it's interesting to know who they are. Because remember, at the time, Tony Fauci is the most important person in the world because he's coordinating the most important country's response to the gravest public health threat in all human history. So he is, by definition, a powerful guy. Now, what's the media's job? To hold the powerful to account and to tell the rest of us what they're doing in our name with our money. That's the whole point. But are they doing that? Oh, no. Oh, no. They are assiduously sucking up to those people. And it's very obvious when you watch because they never give them a hard time. And if someone does give them a hard time, someone actually like hassles a U.S. senator, people are like, I can't believe you said that to a U.S. senator. What? It's my job. I'm impressed because you're a senator? I don't think so. But most people in cable news are very impressed by that. And Fauci was very impressed by them. So they all got together. Here's one example. I mean, this is so revealing and so embarrassing. You'd think people would resign over this, but they won't. Here's one. This is October 23rd, 2020, and I'm quoting now. Had dinner at my home with Jake and Jennifer Tapper. Relaxed, good time. Jake clearly believes that Trump is totally nuts. Oh, Jake believes Trump is totally nuts. It's kind of like that, high-toned Georgetown salon talk. I think Trump is totally nuts. I agree with you, Jake. Jennifer, what do you think? Had a really relaxed time. Some guy who's got like a midday show on CNN with 400,000 viewers on a good day. He's so excited. Had dinner with Jake and Jennifer Tapper. Future historians take note. Future historians would be like, Jake and Jennifer Tapper, what is that? Were they senators? I have no idea because it doesn't mean anything. But Fauci doesn't know that. Some low-rated CNN anchor who thinks Trump is nuts. Ooh, thank you for the insight. These diaries will live through history. You really were a trenchant observer of your time. This is what Twitter does to people after a while. They write crap like this in their personal diary on a government server. It's unbelievable. But the whole media were like this. Like everybody loved Fauci, of course, because he's representative of the bureaucratic class, the committee class, the credentialed class. He's a doctor. He's an eminent scientist. Is it imminent or eminent? We're not sure. He's a very impressive scientist. But what's interesting is that Fauci, because he is a narcissist, literally a textbook, not a doctor, but I'll diagnose it, he's a narcissist, obsessed with himself and deeply insecure. There's the short thing, obviously, not to be mean, but that's real. But not all short people are narcissists, of course, not all are insecure. But he really is. So any criticism, he just can't let go. He can't handle it. And he writes about it faithfully in his diary on the government server. So, for example, we find on June 18th, 2022, at this point, Fauci has COVID after telling us that if you take the shot, you can't get COVID or transmit it to anybody else. And you better do it because if you don't, you hate your grandparents. Do you remember that? But then he got it after getting injected again and again with this crap. Maybe it was sugar water. Maybe he didn't get it. Who knows what the truth is? But anyway, he kept getting it after at least pretending to get the vax. So the rest of us are like, wait a second. You told us if we get this, we're not going to get the virus, but here you have the virus again. So some of us noted that. He didn't like that at all. And here's what he said on June 18th, 2022. Quote, the usual stuff is going on regarding my infection with Tucker Carlson. Imagine writing a sentence like that, moron. The usual stuff is going on regarding my infection with Tucker Carlson, doing a 5 or 10 minute discussion, tearing me down, but the usual accusations and belittling the people who are supporting me. What a total asshole. What a total asshole. 2 exclamation points. Fair. Guy's kind of an asshole. True. But come on, Tony. Take a few steps back here. I mean, yeah, the guy's a total asshole. No one has ever really denied that. But you're the one who told us that getting this gene therapy shot would prevent us from getting the virus, and now you have it again. So how about you address that? Tearing me down. Again, this is the banality of evil. So if he were like evil in sort of an old-fashioned way, he'd be like, they're on to me. They have discovered that the so-called vaccine, which is not really a vaccine, it's never to reduce human population globally so our robot masters can take over with AI. And they're on to me. It doesn't reduce the risk of getting COVID. Now they know. Instead, he's like this bitchy old woman. Oh, what an asshole. Tearing me down. Just tearing me down. Can't say anything positive. Just tearing me down. This is how they talk at meetings throughout the federal government. This is the HR lady in charge of our national public health strategy. Man, we are getting what we deserve. And if you think of how this guy was described, he's an eminent scientist. He's a scientist. He went to Cornell, which, by the way, is technically in the Ivy League. He's an Ivy League educated scientist. Do you not believe science? If an Ivy League educated scientist tells you something and you don't believe it, that's like apostasy. An eminent Ivy League educated scientist tells you that. Instead, he's like mad about some cable news segment on Fox News. Oh, it's so good. So ultimately, this just becomes too much for Fauci. Like, he just goes totally crazy and decides, you know what? I don't want to deal with those assholes on Fox News. There was really only one asshole on Fox News. In fact, Fox News, by the way, was totally pro-Fauci, as you may or may not recall. But those of us who worked there at the time remember very well the vax mandate at Fox News. And some of us lived far enough away, it was just like, I'm not dealing with that. I'm not going to your sexual harassment seminars, or your I'm racist because I'm white seminars, or your trans pronoun seminars. You know, it's like, it's not optional, but some of us just ignored it. Like, how about make me? And they didn't. But if you're a producer at Fox, especially if you were a young woman at Fox and you like wanted to maybe have children in the future, and so you didn't want to take an experimental gene therapy, you had no choice. And some of us said, well, wait a second. You can't make my staff, especially young women. I thought we were for women. Aren't we for women? But not actual women, just women in theory, meaning abortion. But actual women who might want to have babies and don't want to be gene therapied into infertility, those women, no, shut up and take it. Or you can't come in the building or whatever, we fire you. And so my show said no. I said no. I'll resign if you do that. And they just ultimately backed off. But Fox was not the worst offender, by the way. There are many worse. The U.S. military behaved shamefully, worse than any defeat in any battle, the way that they treated their own men. And Fox wasn't as bad as that. But they're pretty bad because they believe the science. Because here you had this Ivy League educated scientist who never actually did any science. And they just kind of went with it. Because by that point, the whole society had been so feminized that every institution had exactly the same attitude, which is, well, the authorities say so. It's for your safety. The authorities say so. There's like no men left by that point. And the few men left are the ones who didn't want the vax. And this was a perfect opportunity to just cast them out, to destroy them. And that's exactly what they did. In any case, Fauci got so frustrated with his mistreatment at the hands of like two people in all American media that he decided, you know what? I'm going to go see the people who really love me. In the heart of every liberal, there is this core belief that the blacks love me. The blacks love me. They love me. They love me. I'm a hero to the blacks. It's like that scene in Animal House when they go in. Otis Day and the Nights. Otis, he loves us. Otis, he loves us. So Fauci goes, he's like, let's go. I have an idea. Here's what we'll do. We'll go to Southeast DC where the black people live. And, there's been just some misinformation, unfortunately. I guess they're all watching that show on Fox News. Black people in Southeast DC watch a lot of Fox News. And they've been somehow fed this misinformation, maybe by Russia, maybe they're watching RT. And they have these concerns, which we're not going to dismiss because they are Black. And so they have a lot of historical claims, that we have to take seriously. But they've been convinced that maybe this whole vaccine thing is a bad idea. So I'm going to go there with the mayor of Washington, who is Black. Hilariously, she's like about as Black as Fauci or me, like not actually Black, but whatever. And we're going to go tell the Blacks, like, hey, we're here. It's okay now. We're here. We're on your side. And we're going to tell them how great the vax is. And here's what happened next.
The people in America are not settled with the information that's been given to us right now. So I'm not going to be lining up taking a shot on a vaccination for something that wasn't clear in the first place. And then you all create a shot in miraculous time. It takes years to create vaccination.
Well, it used to take years.
Okay, it used to.
You know how many years were invested in this approach? About 20 years of science to get us to be able to do it.
20 years is not enough. And 9 months is definitely not enough for nobody to be taking no vaccination that you all came up with. Because when you start talking about paying people to get vaccinated, when you start talking about incentivizing things to get people vaccinated, it's something else going on with that. Something else going on.
It is something going on with
something else.
You're right. But I'm glad millions of people like me and most everybody here didn't get an incentive. You know what their incentive was? Protecting their health and protecting the city. But I won't keep you anymore.
It's okay, because my incentive, y'all campaign is about fear. It's about inciting fear in people. You all attack people with fear. That's what this pandemic is. It's a fear. It's fear, this pandemic. That's all it is.
There's something going on with that. Oh, you think? Don't know that man's name, have no idea why he didn't immediately become head of NIH, because he's obviously a lot wiser than the people who actually ran it, Francis Collins and the rest of those liars. But that guy just knew. He knew. And you'll notice the Black mayor of DC say, all right, we're not going to bother you anymore. Everything that man said, whose name has not been recorded by history, or at least by us, was indisputably true. That's the reason that the vaccination rate for urban Black people in the United States was relatively low. Not because they were getting disinformation, but because they weren't. They weren't watching Fox News in the same numbers. They weren't watching MSNBC and CNN in the same numbers. So they just applied like what seemed obvious. Really, you did this in 6 months? It's not actually been tested on anybody? You want me to put it in my body? And you're telling me that if I don't, I'm a bad person? Why are you telling me that? Why are you ruling by fear and asking me to trust you? That was spot on. But Fauci, because he's a narcissist, didn't let those words penetrate. He was like, the Blacks, I still think they love me, but they're very uneducated. Imagine what his thoughts were in that moment. Imagine the actual racism going through his brain right then. We found this Black guy and was just lecturing Fauci about real science. Like, where's the evidence? Fauci's like, no. We got this. No, you don't. So great. But it caused him not a moment of actual self-reflection. Not one moment. Fauci was convinced from the beginning of this, well, really from the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, which was a real epidemic, by the way, until today, in his appearance before the Senate Homeland Committee, that not only is he right about everything and should be treated as such without evidence of any kind, because that's science, just take my word for it, that's science. I'm a guy with a Ivy League adjacent, or is Cornell in the Ivy League? Does it actually count? Whatever, we'll just call it the Ivy League, Cornell. I've got this degree and you don't, and so you don't believe me, you're against science. And over time, Fauci allowed himself to conflate and then say publicly that he conflated his own opinions with this thing called science, which at that point wasn't really a method, but a religion. And it was at this moment, in an interview with the former journalist, who turns out, we learned from Fauci's diaries, his personal friend and advisor, his political advisor, Chuck Todd of NBC News at the time. He's since got fired, left, and who knows, he's in obscurity now. But at the time, he was still like able to say, I'm Chuck Todd from NBC News. Fauci revealed really the most important truth about the entire episode, which is that the people pushing this insanity, or at least the public face of this insanity, I mean, clearly they're not making the decisions. The people behind them, the pharma companies, for example, may have had other motives. But the public health officials who are doing the bidding of those companies, and maybe others, really began to believe that their orders should be followed because they said so. Mrs. Jones, can I go to the bathroom? No. Why? Because I said so. And that's the moment when you realize that, like, this science thing, it not only was inherently ridiculous, science is the opposite of because I said so. Science is a way of getting beyond because I said so into provable truths about the material world. That's what science is. But not only did it become ridiculous and something very much like the opposite of what it was intended to be, it had become a malignant force, something dangerous. If this is science, we should run from science. We should ban science. If it's this, watch.
Because a lot of what you're seeing as attacks on me, quite frankly, are attacks on science. Because all of the things that I have spoken about consistently from the very beginning have been fundamentally based on science. Sometimes those things were inconvenient truths for people, and there was pushback against me. So if you are trying to, get at me as a public health official and a scientist, you're really attacking not only Dr. Anthony Fauci, you're attacking science.
If you don't like me, you just don't like science. You just don't like science because I am science. This is like Louis XIV stuff. Science, c'est moi. Charlie Kirk was an amazing person. He was thoughtful, optimistic, convicted, totally convinced that ideas, words, not violence, were the way to change the world. Americans should remember him as the monumental figure that he was. He really was. And that's why we participated in the new documentary, Charlie Kirk, American Martyr, which is streaming now on Angel. Now, this is not a movie about Charlie's death. It's a movie about how he lived, about what Charlie Kirk stood for, the profound effect he had on millions of people around the world. And it asks important questions about our country's direction, how we can return to a culture that does not think disagreement leads to destruction, because it doesn't. Joining this documentary was an honor for us, and it's always a privilege to talk about Charlie and his amazing legacy, and we hope you will watch this movie. Join the Angel Guild to stream Charlie Kirk, American Murder, along with an entire library of films, documentaries, and series that tell stories that other platforms just don't even touch. Visit angel.com/Carlson to become a Guild member and start watching today. So the question is, if that's science, what do actual physicians and scientists think? Well, we kind of know who they are because they not only disagreed with the federal mandates, the vax mandate, and the various, turns out, counterproductive and insane responses to COVID that the rest of us are subjected to, but they said so publicly. So presumably there are lots of physicians out there, healthcare professionals, who thought this whole thing was nuts, but it's the ones who said so out loud and who made affirmative steps to protect their patients in the face of the insanity that hurt so many people and paid the price for that. Those are the people we should listen to. And really top on the list is Mary Talley Bowden, who's a physician in Texas who treated patients throughout the so-called pandemic and did so according to what was good for them and according to her understanding of science, which is provable reality. And for that, she was punished. And that's why we have listened to her very carefully ever since. And we're honored to have her join us now. Doctor, thanks very much for coming on. You've been, it's been so many years now, but you have never let up and never stopped clearly being upset by what you saw during COVID, what was done to you and your patients during COVID, but also never stopped trying to bring the truth about what happened to the public. And I just hope that this is a turning point where more people will hear what you're saying. But first to the hearings today, what did you learn from them?
Well, thanks for having me back on. And yeah, it gave me a bit of PTSD, honestly. And, a small part of me was hopeful that he'd walk away in handcuffs, but alas, nothing like that happened at all. So yeah, it's disappointing, but there are some silver linings. It was basically a sterilized struggle session. He was publicly shamed. And as angry as our side is, his side feels sorry for him, which is in itself a big negative for a narcissist. And it's reigniting a conversation that never should have ended. I mean, COVID was the biggest health crisis of our lifetime. It impacted every single American was directly impacted by the pandemic. And yet the current administration, despite what we were promised, has completely swept it under the rug. And I continue to see patients in my office. I'm an ear, nose, and throat and sleep medicine specialist in Houston. But I sort of got swept into COVID inadvertently. And I continue to see patients in my office almost daily whose lives have been completely destroyed by these shots. I've never seen anything like it. I've been practicing for over 20 years. I've seen drugs come and go from the market. And normally the FDA does its job. They sweep in when problems arise and they do the right thing and they pull them. But here we have blatant disregard for really, truly awful, harmful side effects. And our government has completely abandoned them. And I was, most proud of Ron Johnson today. He was the only one who brought up this issue of the patients that have been harmed. And I'm sure everybody watching this knows somebody who was harmed by these shots. And yet they're still giving them to children. 7 million children have received a COVID shot, according to the CDC, since Trump took office. And even 2 nights ago, Robert Kennedy, he was on with Laura Ingraham. He admitted there's absolutely no upside to these COVID shots for children. And yet he allowed it to happen. It's very disappointing. So I think that this hearing, despite nothing happening, actually, it will reignite the conversation. The anger on X is palpable. And we see politicians that really haven't talked about it in quite some time starting to comment again on it, which now I think is the time to keep that momentum going and really pressure the people that we elected to protect us to do their jobs.
What kinds of injuries do you see from the mRNA shots?
It's a cluster. I don't see acute stroke. I don't see acute myocarditis anymore. I see patients who have severe chronic fatigue. They have POTS, and POTS is where your blood pressure and pulse change erratically with no trigger. And it can be to the point where people are not able to get out of bed. I see neurological injuries, so tremors, shaking, neuropathy, sometimes severe rashes or very unusual rashes that don't respond to steroids or antihistamines or even biologics. And you do all sorts of tests, or the patients inevitably go to multiple doctors. They get multiple tests done, and unfortunately, nothing really shows up. And the doctors who don't acknowledge that the doctors usually do not acknowledge it has anything to do with the COVID shot. And they're gaslit. Many of them are put on psychiatric medications. But yeah, I see the same cluster of symptoms over and over again. And these are patients that are previously healthy. And you look at the timing, and all of a sudden, bam, all these issues come up. And so it's, unfortunately, we don't have a diagnostic test, and that's a big limitation. Now, there is a spike protein test that will be coming out soon, I hope, from what I hear, which I think will help. And we have found that the spike protein is causing formation of these amyloid-like proteins in the blood, which can be detected on a test. And amyloid is an abnormal protein that's very difficult for the body to break down. And so it causes microclotting, clogging of the blood flow. And so that explains why some people have this horrible brain fog or neuropathy, because the blood is not getting to the organs and the body can't clear the amyloid that has formed from the spike protein. So
you've seen, because you've been in practice a long time, there have been a lot of drugs with unanticipated side effects, or in any effect, whether they were known or not, side effects that became manifest and then the drug was pulled. I mean, isn't that the way the system is supposed to work?
Exactly. So Vioxx is a great example a lot of people have heard of. And I remember one of my attendings when I was in residency, ended up getting emergency surgery, and they thought he had a big tumor around his kidney, but he was actually bleeding out because he'd been taking Vioxx. Damage occurred, but the FDA did eventually come around and do the right thing and pull it. Now, why they're not doing it this time is, the biggest question ever.
So what? Give us a sense. I think a lot of people who voted for Trump imagined that one of the top agenda items would be to get mRNA off the market and certainly off the schedule. People want to take dangerous drugs. I guess you could make an argument it's up to them, but you wouldn't be telling parents they had to give poison to their children. Why didn't that happen?
Well, I would argue that eliminating mandates is not enough, and that's a MAGA talking point as well. People can choose, but they're not getting informed consent. The average mainstream doctor who is not been red-pilled or woken up by what happened is not digging into this. They are blindly following our government officials and not properly informing patients. Now, if you want to give an mRNA shot and you properly inform them that they could die from it, which I know several people that have died. I do too. People that have lost their children from these shots, then sure. But the pediatrician's not telling mom and dad, oh, well, we're going to give your 6-month-old baby this shot, but the baby might die. It's a possibility. I guarantee you no mother or father would get that shot if that was the information presented to them. So eliminating mandates is not enough. This shot is all harm, no benefit. I cannot remember the last time I worried about a COVID patient. We have plenty of options for treatment. It should have been pulled off a very long time ago.
Home ownership has always been at the center of the American dream. It is an actual asset, a place people work their entire lives to build, a place of stability and security and real value. Right now, though, too many homeowners are stuck swiping credit cards to cover groceries. There's basically a survival tax of 20% interest or more. So why keep handing your money to the banks when you could keep it for your family? Interest is what kills you. Our friends at American Financing have a better way. They're helping homeowners use their hard-earned equity, and they're supporting Americans looking to fulfill the dream of owning a home with mortgage rates currently in the 5s. American Financing saves its customers an average of $800 a month. That's about $10,000 a year. It's not just a loan, it's a true financial reset. We recommend American Financing. They're called America's home for home loans for a reason. So get out of credit card debt. It is just crazy to borrow money. No judgment, but it doesn't make any sense to borrow money at that rate. If you want out, call 800-685-5696. 800-685-5696 or visit AmericanFinancing.net/Tucker.
Why hasn't it been? What are the potential explanations for that? It's so obviously harmful. I know people who've been killed by it as well. It doesn't prevent COVID. Tony Fauci himself had COVID more than once. The whole thing is nuts. So why is it still for sale?
Well, Tony Fauci, funny enough, he had 6 COVID shots. He had 3 COVID infections, and he had a pulmonary embolism, which did not come out until the diary came out, which is a known, most of us know somebody that had a blood clot after these shots. It's a known side effect. But did you see Trump's post today?
What did he say?
Operation Warp Speed was the greatest success ever. He is not giving up on that. And in my opinion, that's probably the biggest obstacle. The second obstacle is Kennedy. And I love Kennedy. I would have voted for him if he had run for president. And we were counting on him. He was our nuclear bomb. He was the one who would come in and take care of business. He got hijacked. He was diverted to the food. Revamped the food pyramid, and now he's keeping hospitalized patients from having sprites. But he has suddenly gone very quiet on the mRNA, and that is a huge disappointment. I think it's because he wants to maintain his power, because if he were to take those shots off the market, he would be pulled out of power.
He wrote a book. I had him on for his first interview after he wrote the book called The Real Anthony Fauci. It's an amazing book. and kind of conclusive on the question of this technology. That's dangerous. It's scary, and that there is a global conspiracy to foist it on populations, on the global population. And so it's like not a close call. Like, he's against it, right? Didn't take it. He's against it. So that makes me wonder, like, where's the vector of control? Like, how much has Pfizer or Moderna, how much have the drug companies been involved in a campaign to keep this on the schedule?
So my thought with Kennedy, and this is just speculation, I have no inside information at all, is he is loyal to the autism mothers, which is understandable. They're the ones that got him on this train of medical freedom. And
yes.
And he is passionate about getting to the bottom of autism, which I completely commend.
Yes, me too.
But I think that goal overrides mRNA. He's got to choose. If he chooses mRNA right now, he's going to get fired. And so he's staying quiet so that he can make more progress on the overall vaccine schedule for children.
That's a very thoughtful and insightful answer. And I don't, of course, I don't know the truth, but I know him well, and that sounds right to me. That's interesting. Have any of the drug companies that make this and it's poison, obviously, have they been punished in any way? Have there been, I mean, I know that they have blanket immunity against lawsuits, but is anyone trying to crack that? Is there any effort in Congress to drop that immunity, which is illegitimate,
yes.
Of course?
Well, there's two things going on. Chip Roy introduced the Liable Act, which would have revoked the PrEP Act. The PrEP Act gives the drug companies, and not just the drug companies, the hospitals as well, blanket immunity for everything that happened during the pandemic. It's very hard to sue anybody for anything that happened during the pandemic. And of course, that bill was introduced and completely ignored. There's also two lawsuits going on, which one could definitely bankrupt Pfizer. And this is Brooke Jackson. She's a whistleblower for Pfizer. She saw that she was overseeing research for Pfizer, and she saw that they were not doing things properly and reported it. And the moment she reported it, she got fired. And so she is suing, and this has been going on since 2020. And at the latest is that the DOJ, our own DOJ, is intervening to protect Pfizer and have the case dismissed, which is a huge disappointment. It's a key tam case. It's a fraud case. It could literally bankrupt Pfizer. But the DOJ is intervening to have the case dismissed.
Why would our Department of Justice, I guess they've got some free personnel, who should be investigating the Epstein files, but I guess they have the manpower to do it, but why would they be weighing in a personnel case with a drug company? Like, why is that the federal government's job to do that?
Right. Well, it's a key tam cases, and I believe me, this is legal stuff that I'm not super educated on, but the key tam case, normally the government actually joins the plaintiff to go after the fraud, to get to the bottom of this fraud. But in this surprise situation, because Pfizer and the government are buddies, the government's helping Pfizer. And there's another case, again, that gives a workaround to the PrEP Act. And that's the big challenge in the legal arena with COVID, is trying to find some way to work around the PrEP Act. There's a physician's assistant, Deb Conrad, who sued a hospital. She was reporting complications to VAERS. And every provider that gave one of these shots, they signed a legal contract obligating them to report a list of possible injuries to VAERS. And if you don't report to VAERS, you've broken the contract and you can sue. And that is one workaround with the PrEP Act. And so she got fired because she was reporting too many cases of VAERS. And this was in Rochester, New York. And they actually made it through motion to dismiss, and they were in discovery. And all of a sudden the DOJ comes in and they're trying to get the case dismissed.
That's just totally crazy.
Lots of reasons to be strongly in favor of Mars men. Low testosterone is bad. Obviously, it affects your performance more than anything else in almost every part of your life. And that's why Mars men exist, to fix that. The body makes testosterone, but a lot of it gets stored away and remains impossible to use. And that explains why a lot of men at a certain age feel low energy all the time, indecisive, sad. Mars Men could be the answer to unlocking that testosterone so you can actually use it. So to be clear, no needles here, nothing synthetic, real ingredients that optimize energy, focus, and strength. Made in the United States, third-party tested, built with just 8 natural ingredients. Mars Men supports healthy testosterone levels, energy, stamina, basically a sense of drive throughout the day. If it doesn't work for you, 90 days to get your money back. For a limited time, our listeners get 50% off for life, plus free shipping and 3 free gifts, all available now at mengotomars.com. mengotomars.com for 50% off and 3 free gifts. After you buy it, show your support for the show. Tell them that we sent you to Mars Men.
What do we know in the 5 years since this became publicly available about the health effects? Let's start with fertility. There were concerns early, my staff had those concerns, that the COVID shot would affect female fertility. Has that proven true?
That has been proven true, yes. Now, I don't want to scare everybody, and I do worry about that. We think that overall, about 7% of people had a significant adverse reaction, assuming they're still alive. And so, the vast majority of people are okay, right? You're not, your life is not over from getting these shots, but we're seeing far more problems from this shot than we've seen with any other product out there. So it can't be ignored, but that doesn't mean that, okay, you're never going to have children again because you got a shot.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's true for everything, Right. That's true for the worst wars. Some people survive, it's nothing is universal, but over the population, it's affected fertility rates, you believe?
I believe. Now, I'm not an OB. It's not something I deal with regularly,
right.
But the people that I trust, that are the OBs that I trust, that are looking at their data, are highly concerned.
What do we know about cancer?
Cancer is frustrating because the CDC owns that information. They own the cancer data, and they've been very reluctant to share that. So the last update was in 2023, or the last batch of data goes up to 2023, and it did show a rise in some tumors in patients under 50. We are seeing, if you look at what people are paying, what we're paying out to drug companies, chemotherapy products, and Ethical Skeptic, if you follow that account on X, they have some excellent graphs showing how the rise in what we're purchasing for these drugs has just exploded, and the timing is, after these COVID shots, not the onset of COVID, but after the COVID shots. But the CDC, despite our AI and all our advances in technology, somehow they cannot come up with real-time data to reassure the public that we have nothing to worry about with these shots.
Wait, I'm totally confused. So we don't have complete cancer data from the CDC for the last 3 years?
Exactly.
What could possibly be? Well, by the way, Trump got elected in 2024. So why isn't there total transparency on cancer data?
It shouldn't be that hard.
Well, it shouldn't be hard at all. Isn't that their job?
Yeah. And they have very sophisticated electronic medical records. They put codes in. It shouldn't be hard.
Will AI, for all of its obvious downsides, allow us to understand the effects of the mRNA shots any more clearly?
AI is not on our side when it comes. Every once in a while, I'll plug some questions into AI about mRNA, and it's been programmed to follow the government views on the product. So possibly, but I think sifting through data, yes, but giving an accurate picture of the harms or the dangers of these shots, I'm not so sure.
Why would AI be programmed to agree with Pfizer? It's pretty dark. Really.
I don't know. Every time not a day goes by when I look on something AI and I'm just like, that doesn't make any sense. So
right.
It's not too surprising.
Yeah, it's about as smart as Fauci. Were you surprised by his diary entries, not just that they're basically illiterate, but because they show a mediocre mind and not a mind with a scientific cast to it at all, but like just a cable news whore. Was that surprising to you?
Yeah, I was trying to figure it out. Like, why would an 80-year-old man take to pen and paper to record? He's basically venting, right? Which is very odd.
Right.
And what I've decided is that he's the type that would probably come home from work every day and unload on his poor wife.
Yes.
And tell him all of his horrible, serious problems that are going on and complain about everybody he's working for. And I bet at some point she said no more. And so probably a therapist, I'm sure they're all in therapy, told him to take to pen and paper. And because he's such an egomaniac, he figured he'd never get caught. No one would see it. But every teenage girl learns a lesson very early. You never write anything down in your diary because your older brother will find it, and then you'll be publicly shamed for the rest of your life. But he never figured that out, obviously.
No, I'm sure they're all in therapy. I think you're exactly right. Were you surprised that Jake Tapper and Chuck Todd, to name just two among many, who were supposed to be holding the powerful to account, government officials to account on behalf of the public, were instead colluding with those government officials to sneer at everybody else?
Not surprised at all. I mean, we basically I saw it as a pandemic personally. I had, journalists coming after me just because they had an agenda to fill. It had nothing to do with the truth. And it still happens. So yeah, is disappointing, but not surprising.
Do you have any big picture theories on why vaccines became a religion for so many people in positions of power in this country? Of all things you could worship, why vaccines?
Yeah, I will say that in our training, it's just dogma. It's ingrained in us. And there's this instant of, if you question it, you are a quack. And no, a doctor that's like the voodoo word. You do not want to be called a quack, right? And so you're basically, it's part of our training to comply and accept things. And that was one of the, and shame on me. I will say I had, prior to the pandemic, I had never seen an adverse reaction to a vaccine. Now, I do believe that giving 6 shots to a baby at one time, there's a high chance that could be the underlying reason behind autism. And I do know, now subsequently, I've learned of people that have had adverse reactions to these vaccines, but it wasn't in my face the way it is with the COVID shot. But yeah, it is more faith than science for sure. But you look at the leader, the national leading expert in COVID, and you look at his diary, and there's nothing in there really scientific. It's very emotional. Science is supposed to be rational and fact-based. And, he's using expletives and exclamation points and whining about people complaining about him. And he doesn't give the sense that there's anything scientific about the leaders of our public health system.
No, it's embarrassing. But I just want to linger for a moment on what you just said about medical training. And you said we're trained to comply. But my understanding of science was that it was very much like what journalism is supposed to be, which is relentlessly skeptical, and that you were encouraged to question everything because you want to get to the truth. And so you test every assumption. I thought that was the core of science, testing previously held assumptions to find out if they're true. But that's not what you're describing.
I felt like I was sort of in the military. You were basically, you need to stay in your lane. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. You have zero control over your time. You have zero control when you eat, and it was very rigid. And there was this just sense of falling in line. And the people that didn't fall in line, right or wrong, suffered for that greatly. So that drove me out of academic medicine. You can kind of tell people take different paths when they finish their training. And the people that had no problem with that sort of stayed in that academic environment. I got out of there as fast as I could. It was not part of my personality, obviously, but that's the way it is. Now, I can see, when you're dealing with life or death situations and you have people in training who won't listen, I can kind of see that. But there's got to be a little balance.
Ever get the feeling that your phone is listening to you? You mention something in a conversation, and a few hours later, you get an ad for that very thing. Most people assume their phone is spying on their conversations, and it may be, but most of the time, the truth is even worse than that. All of the apparently free services you've enjoyed, you've actually paid for, but not with money. You've paid for these with your privacy.
5 billion consumers are in our identity graph, 5 billion. How many people are on Earth? 7 billion? 2 billion to go.
Every search, every message, every purchase, every location becomes part of a digital dossier that is bought and sold and analyzed by companies you have never heard of. You know nothing about them, they know everything about you, and we can prove that. By the end of this series, you will be upset because you will understand how the surveillance economy works and what you can do to protect your privacy. The world is watching you, exclusively on TuckerCarlson.com.
Yeah. And I mean, skepticism of what you think you know should be like the most basic requirement, because it's when we think we know something that we don't actually know that we cause massive disasters. But what about now? So you were one of the relatively tiny number of practicing physicians who dissented from the program. Turns out you were right. You were vindicated, completely vindicated by the data. But most physicians, overwhelming majority of American doctors didn't do that. How many have come to you subsequent to the release of the data and said, I'm sorry, you were right?
Zero. In fact, I gave a speech a couple of weeks ago to a group of business executives, and there were some doctors there, mainstream doctors. I spent 45 minutes carefully explaining what happened to me during the pandemic and the reasoning behind my assertions, and they just didn't get it. They still could not fathom why I stood up and spoke out against these shots. And they just couldn't fathom it. And I don't know how you break through to those people. I don't think we can by speaking out to them. They're just going to have to learn it the hard way.
It's really simple. As someone who does not have a medical degree, we were told the COVID shots would prevent COVID and transmission. You're not going to get the virus. You're not going to spread it to others if you get the shot. That was a lie. And if you can't acknowledge that was a lie, then you should not have the power of life or death over other human beings. That's not complicated.
It's very frustrating. I mean, look at Fauci. 6 shots, 3 infections, and a pulmonary embolism, and that's fine, right? And he's the national leading expert on COVID. You can't reason with these people.
Well, they're literally unreasonable. So again, that's fine. Lots of unreasonable people. I've certainly been unreasonable in my life, but I don't have, and I shouldn't have, the power of life and death over other human beings. So that's kind of like we can only have reasonable, decent people in those positions, not robotic monsters. So you said at the outset you were disappointed by the hearings because he left without handcuffs. What do you think he should be arrested and or punished for specifically?
Well, according to, there's lots of things, but in terms of what can you really nail him for, lying under oath, right? That seemed pretty cut and dry. His assistant, there's an email where she said that she destroyed tons of emails. That's not legal. There's probably other things that I'm forgetting, but there's enough that you could get him on, but we've got the pardon to deal with.
Well, has anyone ever been punished for the debacle of COVID, for the sort of nation-destroying disaster that they created? Has anyone that you know of been punished for this?
I know of one who was indicted, one of Fauci's henchmen, David Morans, but nothing has happened yet. He's just awaiting trial.
Do you expect others will be?
I'm not optimistic, but it is frustrating because, Fauci's the tip of the iceberg. There's blame to go around for so many people. And it seems to me they could have a field day with all the people they could be questioning. And it's pretty quiet. And they could release all the documents. I talked to a staffer that said, there are lots of documents that are out, just not being shared with the public that could be shared. So, maybe, I'm grateful to Senator Rand Paul for doing this and getting people talking. And we'll see what happens next week when they're going to have a meeting to determine if he was in contempt.
Last question. So people who've lived through this for the past 6 years, some of them have decided, I'm uncomfortable with doctors, with most doctors. And some have decided, like, I don't want to go to the doctor because of what I've seen, because of the dishonesty, the malfeasance I've seen from, unfortunately, licensed physicians. Do you understand that response? And what's your reaction to it?
I completely understand the response. I don't want to go to the doctor anymore. I think there's a group called Independent Medical Alliance. I'm part of that. And it's like-minded doctors that did the right thing during COVID. And that's a starting place. If you're, not 100% doctors aren't bad. There are some good ones.
Yes.
Your best bet is just take care of your health. And it's all common sense. Manage your weight, get enough sleep, manage your stress, try to eat right. But yeah, it's a tough problem. And we also, I think the bigger problem is the hospital situation, because you basically sign your rights away when you go to the hospital. And I don't have a great place to send anybody.
Mary Talley Bowden, thank you so much for what you did and continuing to do, and for explaining what we saw today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. We'll be back next Wednesday.